You're listening to The Building Code, your guide for a better way to run your business. I'm Tom Houghton.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Worth in the studio.
In the studio, we're back again.
We're back at it.
Exactly.
Feels great.
Yeah, we've got some great podcasts lined up for you here in the month of June.
Summertime. Boy, we're feeling it here. 90 today?
Yeah, and Let's go. In the studio, the air conditioning is like not on today. A
little warm.
So,
it's okay.
Yeah, but we'll get there. Speaking of warm, our guests are from a warm climate in Fort Worth, Texas. Joining us today, Brett and Kara Phillips from High Street Homes. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having us.
We're happy to be here. And we are feeling summer as well down here, so We're hot.
It's perfect.
I was going to be really bummed if you were like, actually, Tom, it's
a little frigid.
We've had a cold front move in.
No, we're both in the central part of the country, so we should be good.
Right on target.
High Street Homes. Let's jump in. How did you get that name? That's a question I like to ask people a lot.
It's true.
High Street Homes came from, we like the idea of the main part of a town being the center, which is like Main Street. And so High Street is really the main part another name for Main Street, but it's not Main Street. So
it's High Street. Is that Tom? You lived in the UK?
I did.
Our listeners should know this. How long?
5 years total.
In London or in
outside of London? Yep. And so lived off of a high street in Jerry's
High Street's
Cross,
Main Street.
Well, yeah, kind of like the main drag. It's got your grocery stores there. You've got your pubs. You've got your newsstand. It's all kind of right there. It's really the heart of a small town.
And what else do they say? You're not downtown, but
the city?
No, it's like
City Central.
City Central. Yeah. So those are two terms you hear over there: High Street and City Central. Good. That makes sense to us. Are you guys from Texas, or did you spend time in the UK? Or
I'm a born and raised Texan.
Nice.
And I'm a born again Texan. I'm from Southern California and grew up just outside of Santa Barbara. So two of my best friends from college married girls from Texas. So there's 3 California boys that were best friends that married 3 Texas girls that were best friends. So it's really odd and really good.
Yeah, that works.
Sounds like the next best country song there, right?
Yeah,
3 guys from California, 3 girls from Texas.
Well, I like Born Again Texan. That's got some legs.
I'm sure that's already a song.
You think so?
Well, check the show notes.
Check the show notes.
We're
going to do a little producing and see if we have that. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what type of construction and how's your company built? And what we mean by that is what types of projects you do, employee size, that kind of thing.
So we really are a design and build. But I think the interesting thing about us is we started really in construction, kind of with a design hat, if you will. We built our first home, but we actually hired out the construction on it. And so we realized at that time, like during that process, it was in 2011, and Pinterest was new to the scene, and there was so much kind of accessibility and saturation of design other than just going and looking at a magazine. We actually you could get on Pinterest and just like look at the most amazing images, and they were just like flooding everywhere, and we found there was a gap in our market between construction and really great design. And so during that process we acted as our own designers on the job, and we realized, if we actually went into business as a construction company, but we were really design forward, I think we could bring the fusion together at a better price point. So that was kind of like the lift off to our company.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, there are 2 types of construction companies, and the majority is somebody who grew up in the trades, right? So their dad or mom owned a construction business, or they were a framer and they're like, hey, I want to do this myself. So did you guys have any of that experience, or you're coming from a totally different place where it's design and then you're going to learn or hire out the construction expertise?
Kara moved 17 times in the same town. So in high school,
before I had graduated high school, I had moved to 17 different homes.
Wow.
So her family was in real estate, so they would build a house and then sell it and then move to the next one. And so it was this ongoing part of real estate development as there's more space in Texas. So there was something in her blood, I think, as far as that. And she studied finance real estate as well for undergrad, but I think ultimately she wishes she would have studied interior design, which I think through our construction experience helped felt more of like an apprenticeship as you learn on the ground and doing it yourself. I have a master's in organizational leadership. And so for me, it was more about the managing and coordinating people and building strategic relationships and understanding the human piece of construction. We always tell our clients it's a human process, so a lot of things can go wrong, and they do. And so when we're in that together, how do you help manage everybody's expectations but continue to solve problems and get there as quickly and correctly as possible?
Awesome. So I know you said you got a master's. I think you might have got the master's at a university that's very near and dear to my heart.
Oh, really?
I think we've got a little bit of a connection there from Azusa Pacific University.
Wow.
That's right. So we are small world, very small world.
Right?
Wait, is that like the third person?
that we've done?
Didn't we have another guest on?
It's just, it's connections.
And there's like 5 people in that university, right?
Only 5. Yeah. And you've met 3.
Very high end.
So
very nice.
2 more to go. We'll find them.
Taking the small class size to a whole new level.
That's exactly right. I know you just talked about lessons learned too, and I would love to dive into that a little bit. You built your first home, I think, back in 2011. What were some of the lessons that you guys learned from that experience, diving in?
Well, I think because we weren't actually doing the construction arm at that time, we learned that essentially design and construction can go hand in hand in a really neat way. And so a lot of times from the design standpoint, it's only going to go as well as it can dependent upon the contractor on the job to execute. So it's really a teamwork idea. And so ultimately the reason why we had a whole umbrella of both design and construction is because we really just felt the two needed each other. So in order to get the final product to be what we wanted it to be. And we felt like that was a big lesson, is to understand how to bring those two together.
I think a few other things that we've learned for sure. One thing that's kind of emerged more partway through is really valuing yourself and asking for appropriate pricing for what you offer and what that looks like. Really early on, I think when you're new, you don't think you deserve or are worth the value of what you are. And so one book that's been really helpful to us is Profit First. And that's been a really great resource for us in actually paying yourself first and then creating other avenues for different things to say, oh, my account isn't that full because all this money actually needs to go to all these other things. So don't spend money on this marketing initiative or tap into that. So that's one thing from a finance perspective of getting paid and earning what your value is has been really key.
That's great. Is that a construction specific book or is that general business?
They have made it specific to construction. So there's one that's Profit First for contractors.
Sean Van Dyke is the author.
Yeah.
But then I think it was a takeoff of another more general Profit First. Mike
Malkowitz.
He has a really nice last name that I can't pronounce correctly.
That's okay. It happens to me all the time, actually.
It was a really pivotal book for us to read because it did require us to really value ourselves and then understand what we had left to actually operate our business.
That's great. We'll throw links in the show notes for that. There's 2 questions I have. One for Kara. This might be hard, but for somebody who's just not super into understanding construction, can you give me a tangible example of like where the design meets the construction and the problems happen? And like, I mean, like maybe the design calls for a built-in in this kitchen area, but the ductwork's there. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Or
I guess, at one point in our business, I believe it was in 2016, we had a really hard road and we pulled back and we looked at what's happening. Well, we needed to value ourselves more. And we had realized that we had differentiated ourselves as contractors with like a designer lens. So we needed to separate those two. And what we've found is that we spend so much more time in the beginning on the actual design of the project. First and foremost, it starts with the floor plan, which is both a product of design and a product of construction. Mm-hmm. So we both sit down and where I may say, oh my gosh, I've got to look down and I need to see a window through this corridor, Brett will say, hey, and we're not actually separated by contractor designer, but one of us will say, oh, I really want to see this window down at the end of a corridor. And then the other one will say, hey, no, we need ductwork. We need to bring up the wall right there. Yeah, we need to use that space for construction. Okay, fantastic. That is our boundary. And now we're going to make that spot beautiful, knowing that we have to use that space for construction related items.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to follow up on there. So where in your process and also in natural construction, where does the interior design come in? Are you talking to the clients about that during this design process, or do we go, hey, here are the bones, and we're going to talk about paint colors and wall coverings and different things that we might suggest interior design style of colors later? Or is that kind of always there?
We're creating a process, and part of what we do and what's so great about Buildertrend is that having a larger schedule, because so many of those decisions can only flow from the next one. And so we've got to say, hey, we're going to take care of the bones right now. We're going to make sure those are great. We're going to talk about paint colors. That's going to be really important. Or we're going to talk about cabinet layout, but that won't come until we've addressed window placement and the openings and transitions. And so we have just a very large, comprehensive schedule.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to something Brett said earlier, which is some of the most successful construction companies we've talked to, and we've talked to thousands, they do come from a business or systems oriented way to approach the actual construction business. Like, we need somewhere to have these communications, and they need to be tracked, and we need somewhere to schedule this, and we need somewhere to schedule appointments. And so, Brett, was that kind of where you came in and saw an opportunity within construction because so many companies don't have systems?
I think part of that, I just really enjoy people. And so I think for us, we like to create and we like to see spaces celebrate people's every day. And so for us, that ultimately is what drives us and excites us about it. And I think there's ways that I'm still building certain processes and schedules and systems. I think as an extrovert, one of my greatest assets is building relationships with vendors and trades and understanding, okay, what's new or what's different, or how do we problem solve this. And like, as any builder, we're just a team of two. We did have a full-time superintendent that transitioned last year just as our work and different things changed, but we're a small team. So we're hit with so many fires and problems to solve all the time for us to be able to solve this quickly. So I think for systems, those go into play to help. Okay, I have kind of the checklist manifesto. Have you guys read that book and know that book as well? Anyway, I think there's more of a sequence in that of working through, okay, here's this challenge and how do we work through the steps to get through it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you talked about your roles a little bit, that they aren't necessarily, designer and then actually production of the job. Can you talk about that? Obviously, your husband and wife, I feel like that might come up as like, hey, this is my territory. Is there any fighting? Is there any benefit? I mean, I think from an outsider perspective, I think it's great because you have two people then that are kind of like watching each other's back, right? Because there's no like, oh, this is your area. So then also maybe that removes the finger pointing of, well, you missed that, I don't know. Share your experience on that.
Well, there's plenty of finger pointing now. I mean, it's only natural at times. There's so much information to communicate and so many people to communicate with. But we work really hard at overseeing separate parts of the business. And we found that if one of us could take responsibility for one area and then the other person can, back that area up or double check, then that's always great. But we both design together, and we both do a lot of the construction related.
It's a bit blurry, which I think we're still working through a little bit. Working as a husband and wife, there's for sure pros. I think we're really grateful that our mornings and start very differently working from home. I think that flexibility and that opportunity to call the shots, we remind ourselves a lot, oh no, we're in charge. Like, if you want that to look different, like we can change that. But we do overlap some, but we do have our main avenues. Kara's the main lead designer. I'm mostly construction and operations and managing that. And then Kara does some of our finance as well. And then all kind of supplement. Sometimes when you stay in something too long, you just need a break and you're like, my eyes are going cross and I need to change that. But being a husband and wife, there's always lots of good communication check-ins where you're like, I think one thing we've learned, there's funny times when you have a better relationship with a trade and you're trying to advocate for them, but then they've done something that's frustrating that creates more problems. And then we've realized sometimes it creates problems between us. We're like, oh, no, we're the team. Like, we don't need to advocate for the trim carpenter that made a poor choice or added something weird or whatever. We
have to remember that we also, at the end of the day, have to come to kind of a unified force and back each other up.
It's like parenting.
It is like
Against you gotta have a unified voice against your kids.
Yeah.
Have to.
Yeah. Unified front.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That does lead me to a question I had since you started. It has to be a challenge for somebody who doesn't grow up in construction, especially in your local area. Was there some anxiety to saying, look, I don't know any of the subs or trades around here, and I've got to go make those relationships and find out which sub is quality and which vendor is somebody who's going to be good to work with? I mean, I'm sure that took a lot of time, right? You want to talk a little bit about how you started that process?
Yeah, we had a list of contacts that we had to start with, and I think it's always one of those things where there's certain relationships. I feel like there's a lot of trade contractors sometimes that everyone has a heart attack at some point, and someone's mom is always in the hospital, and there's all those funny like nuanced things about people in the trade where I'm like, you told me that like 2 weeks ago your mom had a heart attack, and now she has a heart attack again. Poor mom. But for us, it was one of those things where I think as an extrovert, I'm good at building relationship. And so it's one of those things that you're constantly had to figure out, are these the best people to serve our clients? And are these the best people to help meet the needs of what we're doing? And some people naturally weed themselves out. Some vendors you build relationships with, and it's really good for a certain amount of time, but a sales rep transitions or a product changes. And so I think it's this constantly evolving thing anyway. But I think building those good relationships first is really key. And then you just have to keep building and working at it.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this with Stacy Ekman in our latest podcast. He went around physically to architects to create these relationships. Just pop in, say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I do. Is that sort of how you went about it, or how you continue to go about it? Or can you give me or the listeners some tactical ways to continue opening doors to new subs and vendors and trade contractors?
One thing that I would really recommend is build colleagues in the industry. So I think there's a lot of work and there's a lot of space for a lot of people. For sure, there's this natural competition and this need to be excellent in your space. But the earlier you can build relationships, those are the best people to say, hey, I'm in a pinch and I need a plumber to come do this today. Or, hey, this came up on this thing. Do you have a relationship with, or even asking your trade? So I think building other general contractors, architects, designers that you respect and trust that they have good trades. The majority of them want to share. Sometimes it's hard because they might employ all those trades or they can't necessarily do that. But also, okay, do you know a good painter, trim carpenter? Because they come in right after you and they either make your work look really great or not great. So let's talk through that as well. Your trades want to advocate for you and bring their other colleagues that they like and respect, because everyone wants to feel proud of what they do.
That's a great tip. Let's make your work look good. So tell me the best guy after this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good plan. Let's talk about design more, since that's obviously like one of the cornerstones, I would say, of your company. In the process of building out the project, would you say that design ever influences the build or vice versa? What's that look like for you guys?
Absolutely. I think we always start a project with a level of understanding of the design. And I think it makes our project, we have a much more holistic approach if we do it that way. It makes the client a lot happier. And when it comes to our speculative projects, if we call our market homes, I think it's really important that we have an overall design for the entire project.
Yeah, this has been really, you guys have such a unique perspective. I think it's awesome. So definitely go follow you on all your platforms. And that's my last question. Honestly, social media for a business is becoming more and more important and almost essential. We talk to so many contractors on this podcast that they get almost half or 100% of their leads from their social media presence. Can you give anybody just a quick tip on sort of how you guys built yours or what your philosophy is?
Awesome. We have two. Our personal design one is at Brett and Kara. We have 2 T's and Kara, the preppiest name, so it'll just kind of come up. And then at High Street Homes is our business. We aren't as active on High Street Homes. That's something that we're working on as we have more speculative homes and other market homes and trying to make sure we grow that locally. At Brett and Kara is actually, our audience is really national, which is interesting. And so for us in growing our demographics, it's really important, I think, to know who your audience is and what your purpose of building that. But consistency is really key, and having an authentic voice. I think it's really, for us being in design, people love to see beautiful things in beautiful spaces. And if I think at times in construction, depending on who your audience is, are you wanting to attract clients or are you wanting to attract other builder colleagues and friends? So are you highlighting tools? Are you highlighting framing? That isn't necessarily always beautiful and something that someone's going to like or love. But if you're sharing good tips and information in it, you get to be more respected or trusted. So I think figuring out what are those things, who's your audience that you're trying to attract, and then you have to be really consistent in that. So either that's through the copy or whether that's through the images, it can be a bit overwhelming for sure. But one thing that's really helped us is building relationships with a lot of people in Instagram. We have made a lot of friends, from Artisan Signature Homes to Aft Construction to Rising Your Build to other people that are in construction but also in design. Those people share you and they talk about you and they highlight. So I think there's this collaborative space in that too that has really helped us. And I don't know why people are there, but I think
it's a social platform, so be social is what we always remember.
That's a great point. And Brad and Matt, they're all, a shout out to all you guys. You're putting out some amazing content. And again, go follow them on Instagram. If you missed it, check out the show notes, buildertrend.com/podcast. We'll put links to their Instagram accounts. You can go give them a follow. Obviously that just helps the entire industry out. And obviously you can see all the amazing design work that they're doing. Speaking of design, because again, I really wanted to drive that home. You guys live in Texas. And I feel like when you mention design in Texas, I think of Chip and Joanne and Chip and JoJo, as we're on that kind of name basis apparently.
Sure you guys are, yeah.
So I'm thinking subway tiles. I'm thinking farmhouse sinks. Is this what you're still seeing in your area in terms of design trends? Or are you seeing, what's the next wave of this?
Specifically where we are, we're seeing people kind of gradually leave a little bit of the farmhouse style. And, people are really embracing kind of the taupe tonal kitchens. Still a lot of painted cabinets are happening and wood floors, but everyone still loves a good painted brick home. So
I think there's an element of organic wellness kind of going through everything. So people are concerned about what's in the water or what's in the air that they're breathing. But for people, it's about relaxation and I think a little bit of a minimal vibe in a way, but also lots of amenities, but things tucked away. So I think
it's still light and bright for sure.
That's awesome. I know that our listeners, of course, love to stay up to date on trends. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your knowledge with your area. And I know we talked about relationships earlier, and maybe we can end on this really quick. What would you say to our listeners, so fellow builders or interior designers that are trying to work across the aisle and want to work better together? Obviously you guys have it kind of built in, but for those people who don't have an interior designer in house and they're working with somebody exterior or vice versa, what are some tips that you can provide?
I would start with what are your expectations and how do you work best? So I think understanding for an interior designer, they are limited in what their ability is to navigate it. So how do you both advocate for your client and be in a position where no one's pointing fingers or blaming someone else or using the other person as a scapegoat? Because it's easy to, this person missed this or this is this or kind of finger point. And so
I think teamwork is the key to making that happen. I think a designer is only ever really as good as the implementation of it and the construction. And I think similarly, a contractor can really benefit from a designer coming in and really helping spearhead the design and making a beautiful product.
But I think clarity is key. So whatever you can put down on pen and paper or in images or visual, I think that helps clarify everything. And that's where a lot of stuff, I told someone to lower something the other day and that meant two different things. And so sometimes you have to be very specific on what that means to shorten. So
sure. That's a good point.
This was great. Thank you guys. A very interesting perspective. And we can definitely follow along Instagram for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and just sharing your knowledge. Of course, we're really happy that you guys are part of our Buildertrend family, that you use us. We think that's great. We love builders like yourself who are out there trying to make the entire industry better. So kudos on that. Keep up the great work. And we'll hopefully have you back on at some point or visit you in person. That'd be great.
There you go. Yeah.
Once all this stuff passes.
Once travel's back.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for including us.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Love what you heard? Don't forget to rate and subscribe to our podcast so you can hear from more guests that will benefit your business. Also, please check out our show notes page for more information on what we discussed on this episode. You can find it at buildertrend.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Building Code.
Appreciate you.